So this week I wrote a bunch of projects, one of which is called Qualitative Features of Work and Their Cognitive Load. So essentially what this project is about is how fundamental differences in the type of work that you're doing can influence its mental toll, cognitive load, however you want to say it, so that you can more accurately predict how certain tasks will influence your state of energy, your emotional state, all of that. Um, just because a lot of the times when I'm kind of like thinking about what am I going to do today, I'll just be like, oh, I have these tasks and they're going to take this amount of time, so I can do this many tasks today. But that's not really taking into account the fact that these tasks will have influence on my mental state. So essentially, I'll cover what cognitive load is, metrics for measuring the impact of tasks on cognitive resources, a scoring system for measuring cognitive load, and the practical application of this knowledge. So first, what is cognitive load? So essentially, cognitive load refers to the total amount of mental effort being used in the working memory. The theory of cognitive load suggests that there's a limit to how much information our working memory can hold at any one time. There are three distinct types of cognitive load. The first is intrinsic cognitive load, which relates to the inherent difficulty of the material or tasks itself, which can also vary depending on the prior knowledge of the individual. So this can include the complexity of the material, the extent to which different elements of the material need to be understood in relation to each other, and the prior knowledge of the learner. Next is extraneous cognitive load, which is the load imposed by the way information or tasks are presented to the learner. And so this means that if you present information in a better way, it can reduce extraneous cognitive load. And lastly is germane cognitive load, which refers to the mental resources devoted to processing, construction, and automation of schemas. It's the cognitive load dedicated to learning and comprehension. So then there are also additional contributing factors to cognitive load, such as task difficulty, multitasking, emotional state, environmental factors, cognitive differences, and motivation and engagement. So essentially in this next section, I outline 11 qualitative features of tasks that influence cognitive load in various ways. And certain factors such as time directly relate to cognitive load, but then there are also additional features such as motivation and creativity that can have more complex implications. So these 11 factors are one, detail-oriented. How detail-oriented is this task? How creative is this task? This can be a little more nuanced in terms of the impact on cognitive load because creative tasks can be more fulfilling, but also require a certain headspace and can be more complex given that there isn't a pre-existing formula around how to complete the task. Next is like passive versus active. Passive tasks are like attending a lecture, watching a video, while active tasks require initiative and tend to require more energy. However, if active tasks have more freedom and autonomy, they can be more fulfilling and result in less mental toll. Whereas if you have an active task, but somebody's telling you how to do it, that can be much more draining. Next is time. Obviously, more time-consuming tasks tend to lead to more mental toll. Then there's emotional labor, which refers to interpersonal stresses of accounting for the emotions of others as a consequence of your actions. Next is autonomy, the degree of freedom you have over your work and how you do it. Work pace and pressure. This refers to like deadlines and pressures around your work. There's also social and organizational factors, so like the level of support you have, as well as unclear job roles and responsibilities or conflicting demands. Then there's work-life balance, which is the degree to which tasks cut into life activities such as spending time with family, relaxing, etc. Then there's public visibility and scrutiny, which is the degree to which your performance will be judged by others. And then there's intrinsic rewards and recognition, which is the extent to which work is perceived as meaningful and satisfying. And then as well as the amount of acknowledgement and appreciation for your work. So here I essentially create a scoring function for predicting the mental toll of tasks based on described metrics and their interrelationships. And so here I first had, there's two aspects of this, which is the metric weights and then the metric interaction. So the metric weights is essentially creating a weight to these basically these metrics and their impact on mental toll, because some things like time has a direct correlation, so then the weight is 1, whereas other things like how detail or like how creative it is can be a little bit more complex, so I don't have as high of a weight on that metric. So over here, there's a few weights. So for detail oriented, the weight is 0.8. For creative, the weight is 0.6. Then for passive versus active, 0.4 for passive, 0.7 for active. And then there are a bunch of other things as well. And then some of these have a negative weight, which means that it reduces mental toll. So those things include autonomy and intrinsic rewards and recognition. So then there's the next part of this is metric interactions or interaction adjustments. So essentially, these are adjustment factors that are applied based on interaction between metrics. For example, if you have active tasks with autonomy, then the positive effect of autonomy can reduce the mental toll of being active. So then if that's the case, then we would add an interaction adjustment of minus 0.2 in our equation. So this also relates to if something is detail-oriented and creative, this can increase the complexity and mental toll. So then this would be add an interaction adjustment of plus 0.2. And then emotional labor with poor work-life balance has an interaction adjustment of 0.3. So essentially, we can then take all these variables and create a scoring function, which is just calculated by the summation of the metric weight times the metric score plus interaction adjustments. And so then if we just kind of take this score and have an example calculation, if we have a task that's highly detailed, creative, active, time-consuming, involves emotional labor, subject to work pace and pressure, affected by social and organizational factors, disrupts work-life balance, subjected to public visibility and scrutiny, but offers high autonomy and intrinsic rewards, we might get something that looks like this. And then if we were to just plug that into our function, we would get a total mental toll score of 22.2. And so then with all of that, there's essentially a way to score it where if something has a 0 to 10 mental score, then that would be low mental toll. If it's 11 to 20, it'd be moderate. 21 to 30 would be high, and 31 to 40 would be very high. So a score of 22.2 would indicate a high mental toll task. So this is all to essentially kind of create, we talk about how math is a language, and by providing specific weights for each of these metrics, essentially can create a quantifiable way of showing how certain elements and metrics might influence mental toll in a way that's like just objective and less, kind of fluffy language. Anyways, so when it comes to the application of this, I think that the most important part is just increasing awareness around how qualitative differences in certain tasks can lead to more or less cognitive load. And then based off of that, we can optimize for metrics like autonomy and fulfillment to decrease cognitive load, as well as using these measures to more accurately predict how certain tasks will influence our energy. And so predicting energy levels throughout the day can also help us optimize timing and placement of certain tasks. For example, spreading high cognitive load tasks throughout the week, following with less demanding tasks after accomplishing them. And then it's also important to understand that our brain works differently day to day, depending on factors like sleep, exercise, diet, and environment. So it's unreasonable to expect consistent performance every day. But with all that said, these are some applications of this system of measuring cognitive load that can be applied in your life. So first is task assessment. And so this is essentially just considering these 11 factors when looking at your upcoming tasks. You can rate them according to the cognitive load this required. And this isn't necessarily like plugging it all into that scoring function I outlined earlier isn't really practical, but you can kind of know if you're looking at your tasks for the upcoming day, like what things are going to lead to more mental toll and versus less mental toll. And what I've been doing is I'll just write out my to-do list, and then next to each task I'll write a number 1 through 5, where 1 indicates low mental toll and 5 indicates high mental toll, which can really help me if I'm just feeling really tired. I can look at the tasks that have low mental toll and just knock those out because it won't require much energy. So I think this is just another, metric that you can use when prioritizing throughout the day. All right, so then the next is identifying high stress tasks. If there are certain tasks that have considerably high cognitive load, think about the importance of them in your life, why they are so demanding, and if it is necessary to continue doing it the way that you have been. Because our mental resources are finite, if certain tasks are hogging resources, you might want to consider ways of reducing their mental toll, delegating them to others, or dropping them completely. Next is plan breaks and recovery. And this is just, if you have an upcoming vacation, maybe the week afterwards, you could prioritize high cognitive load tasks. For one way I apply this is doing more demanding tasks in the morning, and then I have to like make lunch, which requires me to like just get out and stop working. And then I'll go on a walk with my mom to like clear my head for the afternoon. So oftentimes this can help reset my brain so I can do more high like cognitive load tasks in later in the day. Next is skill development and support. Developing certain skill sets can reduce the cognitive load of tasks. And then also building in social support can help with the mental toll of interpersonal stresses. And lastly is just awareness of mental state. Without an awareness of mental state, you cannot really effectively apply these strategies. So, using practices like meditation or journaling can help you understand your headspace and what tasks are suited for your current state. And this can also provide a practical purpose for like when you're doing meditation. It's not just like sitting in a room being bored. It's like, let me try to be aware of where my head's at so I can more effectively use my cognitive resources. All right, so in conclusion, cognitive resources are finite, and without proper allocation and understanding of how they behave, we can spend them unwisely. So hopefully you found this presentation helpful.
Round of applause. I calculated the cognitive load of your presentation. It came out to roughly 37.8.
I see.
I think that one interesting way in which you could try to make that more well, so you want everything that you put out as like a theory to be useful, right? This was very useful at communicating that you spend a lot of time thinking about cognitive load and pointing out all these different factors. But one thing I love about mental models is that the mental model, the concept of mental models, to take something that's very complex and be able to communicate it so that you can pull it. It's basically reducing cognitive load of trying to use complex phenomena in real time so it can become more practical, right? So I'd be curious to know if there are certain mental models that one might be able to derive from this much more detailed analysis so that you can use it in real time. That would be something like
I'm not sure if this would necessarily, because if you're thinking about mental models, if you're trying to predict the future, then I think that just understanding what metrics relate to influence cognitive load and how they influence cognitive load might be considered a mental model in and of itself, which is why I shared it in the mental models room. But I don't know if there's any objections to that.
I mean, just speaking personally, I found your article very helpful because you did provide a method for, well, figuring out your cognitive load and then all the applications of it. So, like you said, the in your article that it's the main point is to gain awareness of it and just be aware that some things will take more cognitive load, and then those things are probably you're not going to be able to do it if you're already really exhausted and all that.
Mm-hmm.
another type of mental model you might be able to apply would be looking at the nature of whether or not engaging in a certain activity helps to reduce the cognitive load of future activities, right? With the mental model there being compound interest. that concept. And so like learning about mental models, for example, is something that helps to reduce the cognitive load of future activities where that
Mm-hmm.
might be applicable.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Nicole.
Oh, um, this, it would be interesting to layer into this the concept of flow, right? So the intensity of how much, how much cognitive load is needed for something where you're just the challenge of the thing relative to the amount of expertise you have in it, like getting into that flow.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if there's something in here that can help you identify the intersection of those things in order to chase flow.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I would say that probably autonomy and fulfillment probably does have a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there might be other factors too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just like follow up on Nicole's point, right? Uh, it's like like we talk about challenging task, but not too challenging. Maybe
Right.
like 20% more challenging than what you are like normally um, do that's easily to accomplish. But is there a way to identify it in terms of using this mental toll model, right? It's like, uh, um, yeah, that's a cool idea.
Mm-hmm.
Also,
Well,
like
we.
up on one of the point Daddy Joe made is like it seems like one is like the mental models, so the really good mental models can help you um reduce mental tolls, but also it's like the habit forming and then skill development can help you reduce the mental tolls,
Mm-hmm.
right, over
Yeah.
time. So
Yeah.
how these are all like uh in interact with each other. I feel like it's such a it's kind of like a cool model that
Mm-hmm.
you can optimize.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, and all
Definitely.
these other things layering into it. So for example, there's another externality, which is what, like an assessment of your mood and stress levels and all of that kind of stuff when you're actually evaluating the,
Right. Yeah.
the cognitive load, right? So what is your
Yeah.
mood? And
Mhm.
have you had enough sleep when you are, assigning values to all these things?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Another
I
another
mean, I'm
thing.
actually gonna.
Oh, go
Oh,
ahead. Go ahead, Isla.
okay. One thing is that I just applaud you for writing this project because I've had so much trouble with first sticking to a to-do list and then doing all the things on my to-do list. I like almost never get everything done on my to-do list for the day. And then I get even more discouraged. And so this project is just so helpful, and the formula and all that gives me a huge step forward. And at the beginning of each week, I'm planning to go through all the things I need to do and assign the cognitive load and all that, so I can decide for each day. And that's going to be so much more rewarding because I know that I can get it done.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, we also we're already 25 minutes in, so we should probably.
Wait, real quick.
Okay. Yeah. 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 Go
So,
ahead.
so one thing, so you have a few different ways that you broke out all these different metrics or
Yeah.
factors that contribute. So it might be in order to make it something that would be more, because I'd love to see how this could be something that would actually be practical to try to implement.
Right.
So you might explore different kinds of structures to do that. So another way you could look at it potentially would be things that are hey, mommy, what's the econ term for talking about that which you can affect versus things that, oh, exogenous for endogenous. So in endogenous factors would be the things that you have control over. Exogenous things would be things that you don't. That relates to the mental model of circle of influence. And then trying to stick with that. Like I'm not totally convinced that some of the breakdown here that you have, like the germane cognitive load, like if you take the schema information, the process of organizing and integrating new information into coherent, accessible structures and long-term memory, like this could also be something that, well, I guess depending on how you basically you're almost talking about like your ability to think through complex problems, right? So that might relate to complexity of the material in the sense that for somebody, like somebody might find something to be more complex just because for them they don't have as much experience going through complex materials. But if you can reduce it down into into two categories instead of three,
So
then it
this
would
is
just make it
just
easier.
these are the three types of cognitive load outlined by the cognitive load theory. So these weren't something that
Oh,
I
you
came
didn't
up
come up
with.
with that yourself?
No, I didn't. Yeah, I know.
Oh, sorry, I didn't go through all your references. Okay, we can move on. Okay, sweet.
Also, one thing, Chloe, we actually have a demo day right after this one. Uh, and if you want to join that one and present your other project there, that would be cool. But anyways,
That would be really cool
since
because
since
Chloe, I
Chloe has
would
two
love for you
projects.
to, yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
with the Choi family, Chloe.
Not just them,
Yeah,
also
and
Emma.
Emma's
And Emma,
joining.
yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, we can
Do
move
it.
on.